Bruchim habayim. It is beyond wonderful to have this opportunity to be with you, students, Rabbeim, members of our boards of trustees, members of the Lamm family. A great special welcome to Rabbi Maurice Lamm, Mrs. Shirley Lamm, who have taught here for many years, been both children of the yeshiva and guides for the yeshiva, and you should be here with Gesund for many years. Nearly 50 years ago, Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamm ascended the pulpit at the Jewish Center to deliver his weekly drasha. His words remain vital today. Quote, "We American Orthodox Jews are convinced that we do not face an either-or choice. We can and will remain loyal Jews and progressive moderns at one and the same time. This to us is the essence of being a chacham. We believe with fervent faith that it is possible to live in and combine both worlds, the one of science, the one of the spirit, the one of culture and the other of halacha, the one of satellites, the other of sugyot, the one of outer space, the other of inner space, the one of technology, the other of Talmud," end quote. Dr. Lamm penned those words in 1962 as rabbi of the Jewish Center in Manhattan, and he has lived ever since by those words as president and now chancellor and Rosh HaYeshiva of Yeshiva University. For his lifetime of dedication to the cause of Torah and Torah Ummada in all its facets, for his exceptional devotion to the advancement of Yeshiva University in the greater Jewish world, for his always modeling the dignity of a nuanced life, for his always doing that with his Eishes Chayil at his side as strong partner, for investing his years in ensuring that scholars and students, Rabbeim and Rovam, study, build, hope, and dream together. It is fitting that we, the Yeshiva University community, the community he helped forge and form, honor Dr. Norman Lamm tonight at this inaugural Lamm Prize ceremony. Tonight we recognize Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs as the first recipient of the Lamm Prize for so many of the traits of leadership, scholarship, and stewardship that he shares with Dr. Lamm. It's also good the first time we're giving an award that we presented to the Lord. But we honor him for his intellectual and accessible scholarship, his poise and presence as he models a Jewish life, and the exceptional role model that he serves for Jews the world over. Yeshiva University is honored to confer this award for the first time upon such an extraordinary recipient. The Lamm Prize is the capstone of the Lamm heritage, an endowment made possible through the generosity of many of our trustees and friends, a tribute that was established 2 years ago to perpetuate the life and life values of Rabbi Lamm. The Lamm heritage includes Yad Lamm, a site on our campus that will mark the achievements of his administration, the Norman Lamm Yadin Kollel, where our scholars delve into the depths of Jewish law that Rabbi Lamm has championed, and the Norman Lamm online archives, where a treasury of Dr. Lamm's sermons and writings are preserved and accessible to all. It is my pleasure to call upon one of the grandsons of Rabbi Lamm, Ari Lamm, soon to be a graduate of Yeshiva College, to introduce his grandfather. Ari is a 15th year student at Yeshiva, and as of this week, the first student at Yeshiva University to be awarded the Fulbright Scholarship, an extraordinary achievement for an extraordinary young man, ladies and gentlemen, Ari Lamm.
Good evening. As I began to prepare my remarks this past week, I was reminded of an observation made by one of my favorite comedians. A nationwide study had reported that the most commonly held fear amongst contemporary Americans is the fear of public speaking. The second most commonly held fear, the study confirmed, is the fear of death, which means that if forced to attend a funeral, your average American would rather be the one in the coffin than the one giving the eulogy. Now that being said, I hope you'll forgive me if I feel somewhat intimidated by the notion of having to address such a distinguished audience filled with the leaders, both lay and religious, of modern Jewry. But even more frightening than that by far, it seems to me, is the prospect of having to provide a proper introduction for Mori Zakeni Harav, Dr. Norman Lamm. And the more time I spent deliberating this past week over what to say, the more it seemed almost presumptuous, even absurd, that I should say anything at all. What could I possibly add? What could I possibly say about my grandfather that hasn't already been said many times over by people much greater and more eloquent than myself? And it occurred to me that really my only advantage is in having spent a great deal of time with my grandfather in informal settings, and it's the details of one of those encounters that I'd like to relate to you this evening in the hopes that we'll all gain some greater insight into his life and career. Several years ago, I was privileged to accompany my grandfather on a flight overseas. And as we sat down next to each other, we began to talk about everything from the latest Tosfos I learned in Shir, to an intriguing passage in Josephus, to my plans for the upcoming summer, everything under the sun. Finally, the flight attendant dimmed the cabin lights, and our fellow passengers, including my grandfather, began to doze off. Now, I, however, wasn't tired, so I took out a pen and a paper, and I began to, like any good college student, I began to doodle. I began to draw faces. Now, at this point, I have to inform you all, I have to reveal to you a long-held, jealously guarded secret about my grandfather, and that is that he is a phenomenal cartoonist. He is a cartoonist of the first rank. One of my fondest childhood memories, and any Lamm grandchild can attest to this, was receiving mail from my grandfather with copies of his latest hilarious cartoons of funny people making funny faces. One of my fondest memories. So here I am on the plane, I'm drawing faces, and I feel my grandfather's eyes upon me, so I turned around and I asked, "Zaido, what do you think? What do you think of my drawings?" And my grandfather replied, "Meh." Crestfallen, I turned him and I asked, "What did I do wrong? What's wrong with my drawings?" And I'll never forget his response. His reply to me was, "Every single one of your faces looks exactly the same. They all have the same general expression. They all have the same generic features. If you want to be a good cartoonist, you have to give each one something a little bit different. One can have angry eyes, one can have massive ears, one can have a melancholy expression, crooked nose, scraggly beard, an eye patch, sunglasses, smoke a cigar, anything. Just don't be lazy," my grandfather said to me, "and give each one a distinctive set of features." Now, I have to tell you that my grandfather's response had not only a tremendous positive impact on my maturing skills as a cartoonist. I won't quit my day job, but I'm definitely considering it. But it also really resonated with me because, if I may be so bold, it really epitomized to me his greatest quality as a leader of our community, and that is his ability to perceive with penetrating nuance and sensitivity the precise nature of each and every individual with whom he comes into contact. Anyone who's ever been acquainted with my grandfather, who's ever met my grandfather, knows of his tremendous insight into the human condition, but more than that, his boundless tolerance for others, especially those who would consider him an intellectual and ideological opponent. And as I sat there on a plane, sitting next to my grandfather, getting mussar about how to be a better cartoonist, it really occurred to me, I really understood the secret of his insightful sensitivity. When he draws a picture of a face, even a cartoon, he's so keenly aware of exactly what it is that distinguishes one drawing from another, one face from another, whether it be an exaggerated smile, a comically large mustache. And it's that sense of nuance, that willingness to embrace and engage and understand every single individual without prejudice, that makes him such a treasured role model to his children, to his grandchildren, and Kanai Nahara, to his great-grandchildren, and to all of Klal Yisrael in its totality. So without further ado, Mori Zakeni Harav, Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamm.
I will speak for no more than 2 or 3 minutes. And my words of greeting are divided into 3 parts. Number 1, my grandson. I suppose most of you know that he just this week, 2 days ago, received the good news that he won a Fulbright scholarship. If anyone deserved it, I know it is he. You made us very proud, Ari. very proud. And we hope that your siblings will do likewise. But I must tell you, even if you had not won the Fulbright, we still cherish you. But had you not won the Fulbright, I would refer to the prize as the half-bright. Number 2, my heartfelt thanks to President Richard Joel and the Board of Trustees for granting me this wonderful, wonderful compliment of a Lamm Prize and Lamm Archives Yad in Yadim program. Mr. President, you consistently overwhelm me, constantly, with your very creative kindness, and it's a sheer pleasure to work with you. It is really a pleasure, and to admire your the fact that you're indefatigable in your work. There's a noun there, but it's too long for me to remember. Your consummate loyalty, your ingenuity, which make you a great president. And may you continue to lead us with your fabulous energy, profound wisdom, ad mea v'esen shana. Now, I'm not going to introduce our guest of honor, because that I leave to someone who really deserves to do so, and that choice privilege belongs to the President, whose idea of this evening and the whole ideal of a Lamm Prize, etc., is his. He was the one who thought of it. I merely gave my enthusiastic consent, quite naturally. Frankly, he was not, the guest of honor, was not my main choice for this evening. He was the only choice. For he is the only person whose name occurred to me as the very first recipient of the Lamm Prize. Mr. President, it is with undiminished reluctance and envy that I yield the podium to you to perform the singular privilege of making a formal introduction to a great man, to a great rabbinic leader, and to a great friend, both personally and institutionally.
I'm not the president.
Maybe.
Mr. President, it is my honor to present to you Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs for the conferral of the inaugural Norman Lamm Prize.
This is my phone. Come closer.
As bad as maybe it'll rub off on me.
Jonathan Sachs, as Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth since 1991, you have maximized your unique position to teach and inspire the world over. After earning your doctorate from Oxford and smicha from Yeshiva Eitz Chaim in London, you went on to serve and educate British Jewry and the British people with dignity and distinction, culminating in your being knighted by Her Majesty Elizabeth II in 2005. As Baron Sachs of Aldgate. Are you Jewish? As Baron Sachs of Aldgate in this
is our Lower East Side.
That's your Lower East Side. As Baron Sachs of Aldgate in the City of London, you took a seat in the House of Lords in 2009, together with your wonderful and gracious life partner, Lady Elaine, and your wonderful children, Joshua, Dina, and Gila. The Sachs family in so many ways exemplifies the model Jewish family. During your tenure as Chief Rabbi, you've maintained a prolific writing career, publishing over 20 volumes. You've produced many original works, but you also are adept at improving a classic. Your English translation and commentary of the Siddur has made our historic liturgy approachable and meaningful to a new audience and a new generation, and heightened the experience of those who have been davening for years. As an author and a teacher, you promote a message of optimism and fortitude, wherein both Jews and non-Jews can find guidance and encouragement. You've taught us to heal a fractured world by living in future tense and celebrating life. You've shown an incredible willingness to share your message and teachings with a vast population. While you live in London and serve the world, a particular piece of Jonathan Sacks is at home here at Yeshiva University, where we hope that we are partners in a great message. In your newest book, Future Tense, you wrote, quote, "Judaism is a religion of details, but we miss the point if we do not sometimes step back and see the larger picture. To be a Jew is to be an agent of hope in a world serially threatened by despair. Every ritual, every mitzvah, every syllable of the Jewish story, every element of Jewish law is a protest against escapism, resignation, or the blind acceptance of fate. Judaism is a sustained struggle, the greatest ever known, against the world that is, in the name of the world that could be, should be, but is not yet. There is no more challenging vocation. Throughout history, when human beings have sought hope, they have found it in the Jewish story. Judaism is the religion, and Israel the home of hope," unquote. For spreading hope in a world desperately in search of it and in need of it. For acting as an exemplar of distinguished Jewish thoughts and deeds. For championing God and Torah with the whole world watching. It is my profound honor to bestow upon you the Norman Lamm medallion as a visible symbol of the high regard in which you are held. Can we do a picture with you? Ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks.
President Jul, Kvod Harav, Rabbi Norman Lamm Shlita, distinguished Rabbanim friends, thank you for this honor. President Jul, you did really well. I think you even better than Her Majesty, which is the last, in case you're looking for a promotion. And I am deeply touched and deeply moved by your words. And I had to remind myself of what a great American Adlai Stevenson said when he said, compliments are fine, so long as you don't inhale. But friends, I want to say what a privilege it is to stand in this great hall, in this great institution, Yeshiva University, which is, for me, and I say this carefully, the single most important educational institution in Chutz La'aretz. And to do so in the presence of your outstanding president, Richard Jul. I want to say, Richard, what a fine job you have done. The Yeshiva is lucky to have you, and I wish you and Esther continued success in all you do. But tonight, friends, isn't about me, it isn't about President Jul, it isn't about Yeshiva University, it is about the man who has won the affection and admiration of everyone in this room tonight and thousands more. The real person we are here to honor is Rabbi Norman Lamm. Friends, I want to tell you a very simple story. It is set back 42 years ago in 1968. A young philosophy student from England came to America in search of Jewish thinkers to strengthen his faith and alleviate his doubts. One of those thinkers, already famous, was Rabbi Norman Lamm. In those days, a congregational rabbi, not yet president, but already a teacher at Yeshiva University. The student, being a little verblonget, had not managed to arrange a meeting in advance. Instead, relying on a combination of serendipity and chutzpah, he phoned up and asked for an immediate meeting. Now, I have to tell you, there is no conceivable reason why this rabbi should even see this student from 3,000 miles away with whom he has no connection, let alone spend time with him. But that is what Rabbi Lamm did. He took this young student, a total stranger, into his office in the shul and spoke with him for more than an hour about Torah U'Madah, about synthesis, about Rav Kook, and about Yeshiva University, where he said Torah was strong and Madah was strong, but where, back in 1968, he wasn't sure that the synthesis between them had fully happened. That was, of course, before Rabbi Lamm became president of Yeshiva University, before he wrote his own most important books, before he launched institutions like the Orthodox Forum and the Library of Jewish Ethics, and of course, the student was me. It explains why tonight is so personally meaningful for me, as a way of saying thank you for that act of generosity of spirit 42 years ago, which left an indelible impression on me. Friends, you don't need me to tell you about the public Norman Lamm, the president who saved Yeshiva University from financial crisis, who built it into the mighty university it is today. You don't need me to tell you about Rabbi Lamm, the superlative writer, speaker, teacher, and Ben Torah, the man who unflinchingly carried the banner of Torah U'Madah, sometimes in the face of attacks from left and from right. As I said, if you remember, when you conferred an honorary doctorate on me and I gave the commemoration address, I said to the graduating students, if you are faithful to the principles you have learned in this institution, you will be attacked by the right and by the left, and when that happens, that will be your honorary doctorate. Friends, you know that Rabbi Lamm. I just want you to know of the private Rabbi Lamm, whose kindness all those years ago to one young student helped change his life. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in standing and showing our appreciation of one of the Gedolei Zmanenu, Rabbi Norman Lamm. Friends, now to tonight's lecture. In 1756, the self-proclaimed defender of freedom and the hero of the Enlightenment, Voltaire, published a virulently anti-Semitic essay about the Jews. They had, he said, contributed nothing original to civilization. No art, no science, no philosophy, even their religion they had borrowed from others. That was in 1756. Within the next 200 years, the Jewish people whom he condemned for adding nothing new to human thought, had produced an explosion of brilliance and originality, the like of which it is hard to find parallel in the entire intellectual history of humankind. In physics, Einstein; in sociology, Durkheim; in anthropology, Levi-Strauss; in philosophy, Bergson, Wittgenstein; in music, Mahler and Schoenberg; in literature, everyone from Proust and Kafka to Isaac Bashevis Singer and Shai Agnon; in psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, absolutely everyone except for the token Gentile Jung. 39% of Nobel Prize winners in economics, 28% in medicine, 26% in physics, 47% of world chess champions, everyone, in short, from Irving Berlin to Isaiah Berlin. You name it, they did it. Even when it comes to apikorasim, let's face it, we did well. Jews produced 3 of the 4 greatest apikorasim in the modern world. Spinoza, Marx, and Freud. The only one who wasn't Jewish was Darwin. Why Darwin wasn't Jewish, I have no idea. Every qualification: long beard, big hat, total apikoros, should have been Jewish. It must have been a random genetic mutation. But, and this is the but, the relationship between those thinkers and Judaism was at best total indifference, at worst active hostility. Most abandoned Judaism. In some cases, Marx, Wittgenstein, their parents had already abandoned Judaism. Many, like Marx and Freud, were intensely opposed to religion as such, and that is the unspoken tragedy of the modern Jewish world. The Catholic historian Paul Johnson once called Rabbinic Judaism an ancient and highly efficient social machine for the production of intellectuals. And yet, for the past 250 years, Judaism has lost its intellectuals. And we can put the problem very sharply. Today, there are more Jews studying at university than ever before. Today, there are more Jews studying at Yeshiva than ever before. More than in the great days of Mir and Panovich and Volozhin, more than in the days of Sura and Pumbedita, and yet the connection between them is less than ever before. There is a form of cerebral lesion in which the right and left hemispheres of the brain are both intact, but the connection between them is broken, and the result is dysfunction of the personality. Today, the Jewish people as a whole is suffering from a collective cerebral lesion. And to see how wrong this situation is, how at odds with the fundamentals of Jewish values, I want you just briefly to accompany me this evening on an intellectual journey to trace the basic structures of the Jewish mind. Structure shared by neither of the other Abrahamic monotheisms, Christianity and Islam, quite different, and a structure shared neither with any figures in the mainstream of Western philosophical thought, from Plato to Descartes to Kant and beyond. And let us begin at the beginning. Bereshit bara Elokim. As soon as we step back and look at the structure of the first 12 chapters of Bereshit, we see something very odd indeed. The theme of Chumash, the theme of Tanakh as a whole, is clear. Rashi says so in his comment to the very first word of Torah, Bereshit, Bishvil Torah, Anikra Reshit, Bishvil Yisrael, Anikra Reshit. The Torah is about the Jewish people, a particular people, an Am Segulah, a unique people. But the Torah does not begin with the Jewish people. It begins instead with a series of archetypes of humanity as a whole. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, Babel and its builders. And not until those 4 failures does the narrative focus to the particularity of one man, Abraham, one woman, Sarah, who become a tribe, who become a collection of tribes, who become one people. The Torah begins with the universal, and only then does it move to the particular. And you will find that that is the basic structure of Jewish thought. You will find it replicated wherever you look. Birkat HaMazon begins with the universal, Hazon et Ekol. Only then does it narrow its focus to the particular, Al Haaretz Val HaMazon, and then even more to Yerushalayim. The brachas before Kriya Shema begin with the universal, with the universe, Yotzeh HaMaorot, and only then do they move to the particularity of God's love for Israel, Habocheh Ba'amo Yisrael Ba'ahava. And what makes this unusual is that it is precisely opposite to the mainstream tradition in Western philosophical thought. Alfred North Whitehead called the whole of Western philosophy a series of footnotes to Plato. And for Plato, knowledge begins with particularities, the things we see with our senses, but it culminates in the universal, and only the universal is ultimately real and true. In other words, as I put it in one of my books, the Torah is the West's supreme example, the only great example, of a counter-Platonic narrative. Now let's move on. We've seen the dual focus of the narrative. Then come, again, something that you won't find in Christianity and Islam, the structure of Bereshit built around two different covenants. Number one, with Noach, and through him all humanity. Number two, with Avram, and through him the covenantal family. So the narrative movement moves universal to particular, the first covenant with Noah universal, the second with Avram particular. Now, we add to this the third element. Notoriously, famously, the Torah functions on the basis of two primary names of God, Elokim and Hashem. We know how Chazal interpreted those names, Elokim midat adin, Hashem midat rachamim. However, much more fundamental is the analysis given by Yehuda Halevi in Book 4 of the Kuzari, where he points out that Elokim and Hashem are words of different logical type. Elokim, he says, is a collective noun, meaning the totality of all forces operative in the universe. The ancients personified natural forces as gods. They called each one an El, and therefore Judaism groups them all together, Elohim, and says God is the totality of all those forces. Hashem, says Yehuda Halevi, is not a noun at all. It is a proper name. The way the president of Yeshiva University is Richard and the chancellor is Norman, the proper name of the creator of the universe is Hashem. Now, we only give proper names to persons, or sometimes by extension, things for which we have some affection, the car, a pet, whatever you have. But if you use a proper name, that implies personal relationship, friendship, even intimacy. I feel terribly embarrassed reminding you of this in this great republic, but you can call the Queen Your Majesty. Call her Elizabeth, and you'll still land up in the Tower of London. So, or at least you won't be invited back to Buckingham Palace a second time. So we have two names for God. Number one, an abstract noun. Number two, a proper name. Number one implies distance, detachment. It's impersonal. Hashem, on the other hand, is personal. It is attached, not detached. What Yehuda Halevi called the God of Aristotle and the God of Abraham. So, we now then make the next discovery, which is very striking. That throughout Bereshit and generally throughout Torah, God appears not just to Jews, but to non-Jews likewise. Avimelech, he appears, for instance, but as Elokim. If you look at all the non-Jews to whom Hashem reveals himself in Bereshit, it is always to Elokim. And the Torah assumes that non-Jews will understand the concept of Elokim. Joseph says to Potiphar's wife, "How can I yield to you v'chatasi l'Elokim?" He takes it for granted that she will understand that when he uses the word Elokim, it is meaningful for her. The Torah assumes that non-Jews relate to Elokim. What they don't relate to is Hashem. So, for instance, Pharaoh of Joseph says about Joseph, "Hanimtza kazeh ish asher ruach Elokim bo." Pharaoh finds it not problematic to say that Joseph has within him the Spirit of God, But Moses Pharaoh says, Mi Hashem, lo yodati ad Hashem. Hashem does not appear to non-Jews, Elohim does. So we see that as with the two covenants, so with the two names of God, Elohim is universal, can be understood by anyone. But Hashem is particular to the Jewish people. Let us now take this analysis one stage further. What is the primary arena in which we encounter Elohim? And the answer is obvious. Bereshit bara Elohim. Elohim is God as manifest in creation. To repeat, that is what Elohim means. The force of forces, the cause of causes, the prime mover, the source of all being, God of creation. However, immediately in chapter 2, we begin to encounter Hashem Elohim. In chapter 4, just Hashem. And when God enters into a personal relationship with somebody, with Adam, with Chava, with Cain, with Hevel, when he discloses himself to them, when he speaks, when he listens, when he commands. Hashem is the God of revelation. Elohim is the God of creation. Hashem is the God of revelation. So we are beginning to see a picture building up, a duality between the universal and the particular, Noach and Avram, a covenant with all humanity, a covenant with one particular people, Elohim, Hashem, the God of creation, the God of revelation, God as he appears to Jew and non-Jew alike, God as he appears specifically to Zerah Avraham. No sooner do we say this than we then see that this dual metaphysic of Judaism generates a dual epistemology, two different forms of knowledge. And they belong to this total worldview. And one of the most famous expressions of this is in the Midrash, Im omrim lecha yesh chochma b'goyim ta'amin. If they say to you there is wisdom among the nations, believe it. Im omrim lecha yesh Torah b'goyim al ta'amin. If they tell you there is Torah among the nations, do not believe it. Chochma is a biblical category. There are 3 books of the Bible, of Tanakh, in which the incidences of Chochma are overwhelmingly concentrated. They are Mishlei, Kohelet, Iyov, where the word appears far more than any other book. It appears in Mishlei 103 times, in Kohelet 53 times, in Iyov 31 times. And those 3 books are known generically as the wisdom literature. And if you look at all the occurrences of the word Chokhmah in Tanakh, you will see it is always a reference to something that is universal, just as the wisdom literature of Judaism is closest to the wisdom literatures of the period of ancient Egypt and so on. So, for instance, in Bereshis, the concept of Chokhmah appears exclusively in connection with Egypt. So, for instance, Pharaoh says of Yosef, Ein navon v'chacham kamocha. There are chachmei Mitzrayim. In the beginning of Shmos, Pharaoh says, Hava nitchak malo. So Chokhmah is a universal. And if we ask, what context does the word Chokhmah appear throughout Tanakh? The answer, of course, is creation. If you look anywhere in Tanakh, Chokhmah is Mar Rabu Ma'asecha Hashem Kulam B'Chokhmah Asita. How great are your works, O Lord? You have created them all in wisdom. Torah is never spoken of as universal. It is, on the contrary, specific to the people of the covenant. It is Morashah, Kilat Yaakov. Moshe Rabbeinu says specifically in Vayet Chanan, Umi gadol ashelo chukim u'mishpatim tzadikim kechol haTorah hazot asher anochi noten lefnechem hayom. Torah was given to Jews, not to anyone else. Magi devar av Yaakov, chukav u'mishpat av Yisrael, la'aso chen l'chol goyim. So we see now that this duality of 2 ways of knowing things is built in to the very structure of the universe, built into the structure of reality as Torah understands it, built into the duality of God and our experience of the world. So we now have two modes of knowledge, Chokhmah and Torah, and they're completely different. Chokhmah is the truth we discover. Torah is the truth we inherit. Morashah Gilad Yaakov. Chokhmah is the universal heritage of humankind. Torah is the specific heritage of Israel. Chokhmah comes from being in the image of God, which we all are. Says Rashi to the phrase, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmotenu lahavin ulahaskil. Every human being has the ability to acquire Chokhmah, but Torah has nothing to do with the image of God and everything to do with being the people of God. Chokhmah is acquired by seeing and reasoning. Torah is acquired by listening and responding. Chokhmah tells us what is, Torah tells us what ought to be. Chokhmah yields facts, Torah yields commands. Chokhmah yields descriptive scientific laws, Torah yields prescriptive behavioral laws. Chokhmah is about creation, Torah is about revelation. And now we can understand what otherwise would seem a flat contradiction. The Rambam famously says, Kabel ha'emet mimisho amra. Accept the truth, whoever says it. The Gemara says, Ha'omer davar b'shem omro mevi geula olam. The Gemara says, no, it matters who said it. So how can we reconcile what appear to be a contradiction? And the answer is quite obvious. The Rambam was talking about Chokhmah, Chazal were talking about Torah. When it comes to Chokhmah, if Einstein had not discovered relativity, someone else would have done. What matters is not who discovered it, what matters is it true? But when it comes to Torah, the truth of revelation, then we have to be sure of the chain of transmission, otherwise it cannot be validated. So we see they have two quite different logics. So what we have very quickly seen is throughout a whole series of iterations, a duality at the heart of Judaism between the universal and the particular, as it's translated into biblical narrative, into the idea of covenant, into the names of God, and into the very structure of knowledge itself. Now, let us simply put the final piece in place. Let us locate this on the map of Jewish faith. Rambam famously established the idea that there are 13 principles of Jewish faith. Along came the Tashbetz, Rabbi Shimon ben Tzemach Duran, and divided them all into three generic categories: creation, revelation, redemption. Creation is the relationship between God and the world. Revelation is the relationship between God and us. And when you apply revelation to creation, the result is redemption. And now we come to the spiritual question of our time. Redemption means applying revelation to creation, Torah to the world. How can we apply Torah to the world if we don't understand the world? Here is a moment. March 1991. Elaine and I and the family, a year before, we said about the chief rabbinate what Augustine said about virtue: dear Lord, give it to me, but not yet. And so we went to Yerushalayim for a year before taking up the chief rabbinate to find peace. Mid our muzzle, we found ourselves in the middle of the First Gulf War. Now, as you know, in 1991, Iraq launched 39 Scud missile attacks on Israel. By a series of miracles, there was only one casualty, but there was another casualty. And it turned out to be family stress. Apparently, Israelis are not used to being in one small room with the rest of their family. And that was the biggest casualty of the Gulf War. So, towards the end of the war, we received a phone call from the mayor of Yerushalayim, who said he was setting up a working party on family stress, and would I please be the rabbi on this working party? I said, you have no rabbis in Yerushalayim? And this was the reply. We have plenty of rabbis in Yerushalayim, but none that understand family psychodynamics. And that was when I said to myself, Ribbono shel Olam, if religious Jews, if believing Jews, if B'nai Torah don't understand psychology or science or economics or literature or political philosophy, then Torah munachat b'keren zavit. Torah is an irrelevance to the real life problems of human beings in society. And when that happens, Kol yom vayom bat kol yotzeit ma'achorev umachrezet v'omeret oy lahem labriot bnei albona shel Torah. Is there a single greater humiliation of Torah than it becomes irrelevant to the problems of society, especially a Jewish society? When Torah ceases to be the foundation of the society and becomes instead the possession of a sect which has to, or a series of sects, which have to defend themselves by erecting high walls against the world outside, then Torah is munachat b'keren zavit. Because religion has become one thing and life has become another. And that is a fracture that Judaism cannot allow. Judaism is a code of life. Torah and mitzvahs are chayenu v'orech yamenu. And chas v'shalom, the Torah should have nothing to say to us about the structure of an economy, or the ethics of business, or the breakdown of family, or the principles that govern politics. When Jews appear to the world, how do they appear nowadays? Whether in Israel, or in America, or in Europe, they appear to the world as a series of religious sects who keep their distance on the one hand, and as a secular, deracinated majority on the other hand. Ha-yitachen. Is that the image we were supposed to present to the world? Whatever happened to hi chochmatchem uvinatchem la'einei ha'amim, says Moses, this is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nations. Whatever happened to V'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha? Whatever happened to the idea that Jews in the world are such that people see them and see the presence of God? If they see Judaism not as the God-intoxicated people, but as the highly secularized people the majority of the Jewish community ever had. Whatever happened to the religion that so valued chokhmah, science, that it coined a blessing more than 2,000 years ago on Haroeh Chachmei Umot Olam. Somebody who sees a non-Jewish, a non-believing, there weren't any other monotheists when Chazal coined that bracha. To say a bracha on a non-Jewish sage distinguished for his or her scholarship, the bracha that I made on James Watson, co-discoverer of DNA, when he and I received an honorary doctorate together at Cambridge University. Are we supposed to behave now towards science the way the Vatican did to Galileo, or the way Bishop Wilberforce did to Charles Darwin? Us, the most intellectual religion in the whole history of the world, we are afraid of these challenges. Without Chokhmah, Torah loses its connection with the world. Revelation ceases to engage with creation, and we lose a sense of the supreme principle of faith, so supreme that we recite it 7 times at the very climax of Ne'ilah. Hashem Hu HaElokim. The God of revelation is the God of creation. The God of the Word is also the God of the world. Now I know that not all chokhmah is permitted. The sages were very clear in their distinction between chokhmah as such and chokhmah Yuvanit, Greek culture. The culture of the Stoics and the Cynics and the Epicureans. And I have no doubt today that we have our own Chokhmah Yevanit. Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, what I call the intellectuals' equivalent of road rage. And they would count as our Chokhmah Yevanit, which is not science but scientism, myth masquerading as science. But without a compelling defense of faith, without a literate, informed articulation of faith, we will continue to lose our best minds for the next 250 years, as we have done for the past 250 years. And we will fail in God's mandate to the Jewish people to be a transformative presence in the midst of humanity by applying revelation to creation, thereby becoming agents of redemption. Friends, all we have to do, without compromising one scintilla of halakha or one syllable of emunah, is to understand the world so that we can speak to the world. And then we will discover, as I have discovered, that when you speak Torah in the public domain, it speaks not just to Jews, but to the world. And I don't say that lightly. I've built my whole rabbinate around that. And if this is what we discovered in Britain, kol shekain ben beno shel kol shekain, is it possible in America, where your Jewish community is 20 times as big as ours, and where your whole community is far more central to the life of the nation than is ours? Friends, we know that not everyone will choose this route. It is hard. It is intellectually demanding. But let me assure you that there is not one challenge out there in the world today, moral, philosophical, political, or societal, that we cannot face with total confidence that Moshe Emes v'Taraso Emes, with total confidence that our faith speaks with undiminished power to the formidable dilemmas of 20th century secular time. Friends, we have to mend that cerebral lesion, that dissociation of sensibilities that splits Torah from Chokhmah, God's world from the world in which we live. That is Tzav HaSha'ah, the imperative of our time. And I say this to you knowing that you start with the greatest advantage anyone could have, Yeshiva University itself, led and inspired for so many years by the man we honor tonight, Rabbi Norman Lamm, a man equally of Torah and Chokhmah. He led the way. Now let us continue the task. Thank you.